Are you ready for an open discussion with the best of the best and the best of what's next? Welcome to the Tony DUrso Show. Join in on a great conversation today with some of the world's great influencers as they showcase great advice and techniques that made them the game changers they are today. Now, here's Tony DUrso.
Welcome. Thanks for hanging out with us today. We're chatting with someone at the top of their category, an elite entrepreneur, and we're going to talk about getting more momentum with Will Moore. Now, this intro may sound like a repeat of last week's show, but there is something very different here. In interviewing hundreds and hundreds of people at the top of their category, one point has become very clear. A lot of them have had to deal with adversity, pitfalls, and disasters. And they all learned from failures and eventually rose to the top of their game. So how do we do that? How do we bounce back? How do we make this happen? Is there any business that's perfect from inception? Is there any easy way to success? No, actually, there really isn't. But then again, there is a path to follow that makes it easier. And while we're at it, this is all about helping you and your friends turn your vision into reality. We want to help you get very successful at dealing with and beating setbacks and failures. Meet Will Moore. He started doorstep delivery way back in the day and eventually sold that in the 9 digits. Today, he hosts the podcast Gamify Your Life, and he has hundreds of thousands of followers. It sounds great, but his life was full of adversity that will shock you, and it shocked me. Let's get into it. Hi, Will. Welcome to the Tony DUrso Show.
Hey, Tony. Thanks for having me, man. Super psyched to be here.
Thank you. I am very looking forward to learning from failure, and what you've bounced back from is just amazing. So I'm just going to turn the floor over to you, Will. Can you please tell us what's your backstory?
Yeah. So in my world, I like to call it my origin story. It's a little more exciting, comic booky, gamified. But yeah, so I was born in California to 2 hippie parents. And very quickly we moved to Hawaii. My mom was actually an Army brat, so the opposite of a hippie. My grandfather was a general in World War II and the Korean War, and she rebelled. She went the opposite way. She met my dad. They started smoking weed, drinking, and whatnot, and they moved us to Hawaii, where she'd been stationed at one point. She's like, "Hey, we're gonna live footloose and fancy free. Might as well do it here, right?" So I had an older sister. She was born Puff Sunpath Moore was her name, if that gives you any indication of where my parents' mindset was. I was born Rocky Clay Wooten Moore. So it was off to a start, but we didn't have any money. We lived in there's bad areas of everywhere you live, even Paradise. So we lived in a pretty actually bad area. We were the only white kids. And we went to school, and they called us Howleys, as all the locals. Shaka Bra. I actually spoke Pidgin back in the day. Forgotten it all, but so we weren't super accepted, and we actually got mugged. Well, I got mugged with my sister when she was like 6 and I was like 4. Some kids held us up at night point on the way home, so it wasn't the best environment. Even though we were like 3 blocks from the beach, and we would go, and that was amazing as kids. That's what I remember. But my mom moved us to DC, Bethesda, Maryland. And so we lived there for a while, and I just never really found my groove. I've always been very sensitive, and I got there, and I, had this shoulder length hair, and I looked like this total hippie kid and spoke Pidgin, and I was very overweight for a kid at the time, whatever. So I think people were just like, they didn't know what to make of me. And I took everything very personally, and I just got all in my own head, as a lot of kids do. And I just never really found my groove. And then flash forward, I got to college. And by the time I got to college, I was your typical victim that was convinced life was out to get me. There's nothing I can do about it. My brain is broken. And maybe I'll hit the lottery one day and it'll all be better type of deal. Just didn't realize or think I could do it on my own or turn my life around. And I had a very serendipitous moment from one of my professors. I threw myself into studies because I didn't have any friends. I didn't get into the fraternity, which was like everybody got into a fraternity at this college. And it was like, if you weren't in one, you were kind of like what's wrong with you? You're an outcast. And that's what happened to me. So I just threw myself into studies, and I had this course called Religions of the World. And my professor made a comment, and I thought the professor was really cool. And he was like this younger, hipper type of professor. And I was like, that's the guy I want to be when I grow up. That dude's cool. It's so super confident and all this. And so he just mentioned, he's like, oh yeah, when I was younger, I read this book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. Completely changed my life. I highly recommend it anyways. And then went back to his lecture. And that moment, I didn't hear anything he said for the rest of the class. I wrote it down. I went straight to the library. Thank God they had it. To this day, I wonder if they didn't have that book, how my life would have gone, but they did. And I devoured it like a insatiable self-help beast, which I then became, and was like, okay, there's a different way to look at the world. People do see things similar to me, but I don't have to stay in this victim mind. And that started kind of my journey of becoming what I call now a growth owner mindset. And I just used myself as a human science experiment, just started reading tons of books, taking tons of notes, writing down what worked, what didn't, trying different things. And I just slowly but surely, it doesn't happen overnight, but I started to, like I said, shift my mindset, and my life started to change. And I started to make advances in my physical, in my mindset, in my relationships. I started reading a bunch of career and finance books and entrepreneur books. I ended up taking that path, as you know how that ended. We ended up exiting our big business for 9 figures. So, I got to the point where, and when we did exit our business a couple years ago, that's just one of my businesses. I had multiple, and I realized that that's one piece of the puzzle, but it's not everything. And luckily, I've been reading all these books along the way, and I did understand what actually makes me happy. And yeah, the career part, doing what I loved, growing a business, was an amazing feeling. Hardest thing I've ever had to do. Doing it again, and so I volunteered for a glutton for punishment. But it wasn't just, and then you make a lot of money and you have that goal, but then you realize like what's going on with your physical, what's going on with your relationships, what's going on with your mindset, what's going on with your emotional health. And those are all things that kind of all tie together, and you need to sort of, I call it firing on all cylinders in all 5 cores. I call these your 5 core areas of your life. And I'd just been doing this myself, kind of second nature all these years. And I thought, well, you know what? Now that I've sold my company, I'm just going to dedicate my life to helping other people to figure this stuff out, and hopefully help young adults. I don't think I mentioned I was actually suicidal in college. There was a very close moment because, as I said, it was pretty grisly there for a while. So just helping people avoid that type of situation, to where they learn these types of principles and what's actually important and what makes you happy. So by the time they get to their young adulthood, it's all expressed through their habits, and they've got these habits that are helping them build momentum and become happier, versus what I think is a lot of people that by the time they become young adults, they're focusing on all the wrong things, and your influencers are your parents and school and your peers and media. I mean, they're just, all this stuff is coming at them, and they develop these habits based on what they think will make them happy, which, we're in a capitalistic society that says, make a lot of money and it'll solve all your problems type of vibe. And it doesn't. Take it from me. And so when I actually sold my business, this is a true story, I knew what was coming, but it was neat to see, which was, I got this big chunk of money, and there was like this relief, because it was like 12 years of my life I'd been building this business, and I got this huge check. But it didn't last. It lasted for about a week. I went and played golf. I got some massages. I was like, oh, okay, like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. But then very quickly it was, all right, now what? What's next? And that's when I realized life is about growing, and it's always about moving in the right direction. And that's when I realized, and it's not just that money it's neat and it's nice to have, but it's not what makes you happy. What makes you happy is going out. And so I decided to start this company, More Momentum, and kind of help people. I've always been a gamer and into gaming and gamification. Help people kind of trick their lizard brains into wanting to take the actions that'll make them happy.
Well, it's fascinating, and we're going to get into the success habits and the 5 cores in just a moment. What I want to do is get deeper into that vision that took you from where you were to setting up the Gamify Your Life, which is amazing. When people go to your website, you'll just see that in action. It's a website that's all gamified. I really like that. And also that same vision, I think it's the same thing that took you into more momentum. So if you could tell us why you went down that road to set that all up, what was the reason or the vision for that?
To set up the more momentum actual business.
Yes, the more momentum, and
Yeah.
part of that I think is the gamify your life, the
Yeah, the game,
podcast,
right.
all that
So
you've done.
yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, as I was saying, it's like I got to a stage where I realized, okay, I've made this money. I've achieved my goal. I've surpassed way more than I ever thought I would financially. What else is life about? And then I realized I started kind of putting the puzzle pieces together and taking all these notes and all this human science experiment stuff I've been doing with myself over the years. And I said, well, hey, it's about these 5 main areas. And then I realized there's a second piece to it. It's not just about sharing the info, because everybody has their own take on life. And there's a lot of people that are very smart out there that share their info. But what I saw as the elephant in the room with all this is that personal development, wellness, self help, whatever you want to call it, it's really difficult. Especially, it's difficult no matter what. But in this day and age, with an on-demand insta society where you can click a button and get anything you want, and our ADD is running rampant because you want those instant dopamine hits, and you want to get that visual, and then your brain craves that, and anything that doesn't support that, you run in the opposite direction. And what does that mean? That means learning's becoming a lot harder, and the discipline needed to read books, and all these things that I used to do. I think it's harder for today's young adult to read full on books, like, because they can go on to TikTok, and in 4 seconds they can get that dopamine hit. And so I thought, how can I combine all this? Like, how can I use, instead of going against the grain, how can I reduce the friction to sort of marry the two, to where I'm using behavioral science and technology and combining it with personal development, so that people want to take the actions, and it's almost, they don't feel like they're learning or that they're improving, but it's happening. And so that's where this whole gamify your habits, gamify your life stuff came from. And I've been just, again, an insatiable self-help beast, like learning about gamification and behavioral science, and why people do what we do, and why we get hooked on things, and what makes us take action. Because you got to take the action, and habits, again, I mentioned earlier, that's what this all revolves around, is your habits. To me, you are your habits are you. And if you don't, because once they're done, habits don't care if they're good or bad, helping or hurting you. But once they're formed, that's it. Then they're on autopilot, and they're either helping or hurting you. So if you've got what I call these failure habits that are making you less happy, taking you in the wrong direction, and you've got to figure out a system to replace them with success habits. And I think it's just become really, really difficult. And so hence that's why I'm doing with my gamification.
We're talking about getting more momentum with Will Moore. A little bit of a play on words. His website is moremomentum.com, and Moore is Momentum, moremomentum.com. Well, let's get more into your vision path here and kind of drill down. You just started talking about the success habits and so forth. Let's really drill on it. And can you take us through the journey or through the road or the path on really developing some great success habits?
Yeah. So again, so right. So going back to kind of what I was saying briefly, we have all these habits that we've developed. They come from our parents. They come from our influencers, which are our parents. Then it's school, peers, social media. All these things combine, and then we start taking actions. And then before we know it, those have dug. Our brain actually literally changes. Like if you were to put it under a microscope, and these neurons that fire together, wire together, fire together, they say, and they start connecting, and then they say, okay, because your brain's constantly trying to conserve energy. Okay. And so if it gets something where it's like, all right, I got that, then it doesn't want to have to worry about it, and it can focus on the next thing. And so we develop these habits that are on autopilot, whether it's 10 o'clock at night and you're hungry, and you go for a snack, right? That can go two ways. A failure habit would be you're grabbing the cookies and the Cheetos and the ice cream. A success habit would be you've replaced those things. And at eye level, the first thing you see is a healthier snack that at first isn't going to taste quite as good to you because you've developed that habit of the bad stuff. But it actually, you'll get to the point where if you kind of, I call it fake it till you make it, you keep taking that action over and over, and it's good enough, and you know what the reward's going to be, and you have a goal of what you're trying to do, then you get to a point where all of a sudden, not only does it taste as good, but it tastes better. And you can't believe that you were eating all that crap before and putting that into your body. And you're like, this is such a better. So that's an example of, and that's so that's one habit within one core. That's your physical health core. Physical health core covers everything from your eating habits to your sleep habits to your exercise, and all these things related to your physical. And so it's about continually moving in that right direction by systematically replacing all of these failure habits with success habits in each of your cores.
Well, let's get into the 5 cores and take them one by one, and tell us, what can we learn from you on this?
Okay, well, so your mindset is the first core. It's the most important core because if your mind's not working for you, if it's working against you, you're going to have a really hard time, getting those other cores going for you. And they all kind of work hand in hand. So the more you improve in one, the easier it is to improve in the others. And mindset in particular, it goes back to like what I was saying in college. I was your typical fixed victim is what I call it. Somebody who's like, my brain's broken. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm going to, if I would fail or I would get bad feedback from somebody, it made me a failure versus a growth owner who says, all right, I was born the way I was born. I've got certain strengths. I've got certain things that aren't so great. I'm not going to worry about those. I'm going to outsource those, figure out how to work around those. I'm going to focus on my strengths, the things I'm super passionate about. I'm going to figure out, I'm going to set goals, and I'm going to make sure that I get there no matter what. And if I fail, I'm going to fail beautifully. I'm going to fail forward. I'm going to learn from it. And I'm going to say, okay, what did I get from this that is going to now help me pivot around it to get to that ultimate goal that I'm hitting? And the idea is every single day you're getting bigger, better, faster, stronger, smarter, like the $6 million man, which doesn't sound that much anymore. But remember the $6 million man? Now you're kind of like $6 million man. Now in today's day, it would be like the $6 billion man. But anyways, and so that's the idea. And you give fear the finger, and you just sort of say, okay, I'm going to get there no matter what. And if I fail, it doesn't make me a failure. Or if I stumble, it just means I got to learn from it and move forward. There's a huge difference there between that fixed victim and that growth owner. Because, when you look at life as, okay, I'm not there yet, it's only a matter of time versus, oh, I suck, I'll never get there. Like you've already lost before you've started. Okay. So then you move into your career and your finances, which is basically, it's not just about making money, as we've already discussed. It's about, are you loving what you're doing? Are you marrying your passions and your strengths? Are you getting up every day and being like, oh, sweet, I get to do this every day? And of course, we all have days where we're like, I don't want to get out of bed today. I'm tired, whatever. But in general, are you passionate and loving what you do? And then that comes across, and then those are always the best ways to make money, anyways, because people pick up on that. And if you're using your natural strengths, you're going to be good at something and you're passionate about it. You're going to be able to push through those tough times when you're going to get obstacles that are going to get in the way, and it's going to make it harder. But if you don't love what you're doing, you're just doing it for a paycheck, you're going to run into stumbling blocks, and it's going to be a lot harder to move forward. And then the finance part of that is growing your wealth exponentially, right? So it's not just about making money, but do you understand the law of compounding, and are you putting it to work? When you're making money, are you putting some into something that's growing, whether it's real estate, stocks, whatever? Then the next core, your third one, is your physical health, your relationships. We all understand that relationships are important, but I think, again, tying back to what I was saying earlier, we're in this Insta generation now where you can click a button and get anything. People are staying home more because of COVID. We're not doing that face to face like we did. I mean, this is better than just at least texting, but even being in person, there's changes in you. And then we need that as human beings, and to spend real time with people. And I put it into 3 categories. You've got your colleagues and acquaintances, people that you work with or that you interact with kind of on a daily basis, but aren't on your super tight circle. And then you've got your friends and your family. And then you've got your significant other, if it's something. I don't believe you have to have a significant other to be happy, but if you have one, again, there's certain rules and habits and universal principles that you want to put in place to develop for these three types of relationship. Then your fourth is your physical health, which is, we discussed that, it's sleeping, eating, exercising. What are the habits that you've developed there? Living a long, energetic, full life, versus constantly having pain and weight issues and energy issues and these types of things. Depression. There's a huge link, obviously, between the mind and the body. Depression. They've done studies where, even though I do believe depression is a disease, exercise and eating right can have a huge amount on how depressed people are. Whereas I think a lot of people think, well, if I just need to take more Prozac, or I just need to whatever. And again, I'm not against that type of stuff, but I think it's a combination. And then the last one is your emotional health and your giving back core, which is, basically, are you enjoying the ride? Are you tunnel visioned and just looking 2 feet ahead of you and what your next to do is? Or are you stepping back and going, this is what's important to me. This is what life's all about. I'm going to make sure that I proactively make time for the things that I love in life and schedule them into my routine. And if I, and then handling stress and dwelling, and these types of things, so that those things don't start to take over your life and eat you up, focusing on the past and things that happen versus the here and now. And okay, this is where I'm headed, and not getting caught up in that type of stuff. And then the giving back portion is just, is there an element where you're giving back to the world? Is the world going to say, I'm glad this guy was in it at the end when it's all said and done? Or is it going to say, I'm really glad that dude's gone because he just sucked the soul and the life out of me? Get rid of him, right? What legacy are you leaving? What are you giving back to the planet? And it feels really freaking good. Let me tell you, when you're not doing that, there's something that's missing in your life. But then when you actually start helping other people, helping the world, sounds cheesy, but it's magical. You feel a lot better about your life and you become happier.
Will, how do you help other people with this? Do you have a class, a book, training? How does somebody get onto your program?
So I have nothing that I'm selling at the moment. I've got an app that I'm building that's going to tie into the gamification stuff, which I'm super excited about. It's basically going to take all this stuff I'm talking about and it's going to put it into one app, and it's going to be fun and addictive, but in a good way. So when you level up on screen, you level up on in life, and you're this rocket, and you have these 5 cores of your engine, and you start on Earth, and you've got to first, just to get off of break Earth's gravitational pull, you've got to start replacing your failure habits with success habits. Then you get to the first planet and the next, and you're meeting aliens, and you're fighting through asteroid fields, and you're doing all these things. So I'm hoping to launch that in the next 2 to 3 months. I've been working on that for a couple of years now. Then I have a curriculum that I'm building as well that'll go along with that, and eventually a book that's been kind of in the making for 25 years, like I said, since college. But that's third on the list.
For our audience, if you go to moremomentum.com and click on the 5 cores, you'll actually see a little synopsis of what each of the core is, and you'll get some of the success habits. There's examples. So number 1 is mindset, but you'll also see what the habits are, what that could be in terms of including breathing properly and what you do in the morning, and what you might focus on and stuff like that. There's some very good points here. So take a look at this. And even though the app isn't out, the book isn't out or anything, there's some great points here that can kind of point you down the road so that you can learn from the great success that Will has had and help move yourself a lot faster through this. I think these are some great points to recap. Number 1 is mindset. Number 2 is career and finance. 3 is relationships. 4 is physical health, and 5 is emotional health. And I really like these. One of my favorite is the lunch break push-ups.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So that's just the way, like, I'm working, and then I'm done with the day, and my kids want to spend time with me. So I only have time to work out at the end of the day like I used to when I was single. So it's like, okay, how am I going to fit it in? And so, right, I do it. When I'm heating up whatever I'm eating, I get my push-ups done, and that's become a habit. It's become automatic. And another way I work in exercise, a neat little gamification technique, is I'm playing with my kids. So I'm habit stacking. I'm combining 2 habits into one. That's something that I'm already doing, which is playing with my kids and having fun. And then I add like push-ups, and I'll like take them and I'll do this with them, and I'll, get my triceps going because I've got a 2.5-year-old and a 5-year-old. So they're still small enough for me to do that, or I'll lift them up. And so I literally like work out with my kids, and it's really fun.
Yeah. But same here. When I started podcasting, I've been sedentary for so long, but now I take hour walks with my dog, so it's just great because at least something. So it just keeps you going, keeps you going, keeps you going. So I really like that.
It's true when they say move it or use it or lose it. Go ahead. Sorry.
That's right. That's absolutely right. You have to you have to stay, even if it's just going for good walks. And I live by the beach, so hey, it's just great. I look at the sunsets almost every day. Absolutely love it. I was going to say we've got these great points here, which is very good, and we've learned a lot from you on some of your habits. Did and we've talked a little bit about it, but do you feel there's anything aside from these five core, anything in particular in terms of a habit, maybe just a habit of seeing that you're doing your five core, but just anything that you do that you feel this is really important? Like one of the things you say is you got to have at least 7 hours of sleep. I mean, I come from the corporate days where I think the best I ever got was, well, 5, maybe 6 hours of sleep on average, usually 3 or 4, which isn't always good. So there's certain key points that you have to, I think, have to help yourself move on the path to success. If there's anything that comes to mind on that for you, from you, please.
Um, Yeah. So I mean, so real quick before I forget, one thing that I didn't mention, and if people go to this page at the bottom, there's actually I do have this little happiness quiz that people can take. So the idea is you get a sense of where you stand in each of your 5 cores. It's just like 3 questions for each core, and then it's got a scoring system at the end, so you can at least kind of get an overview of like, okay, where do I stand in my physical health? Where do I stand in my relationships type of thing? And then from there, you obviously would then take it to the next level, which answers your question. So for me, things that I do is I've been using the system for years where it started with a piece of paper. I got it from Benjamin Franklin, where along the spine, you write the habits that you want to develop. He called them your God, I'm drawing a blank. He had a different word than habits, but basically your habits. And then along the top, you have your days of the week, Monday through Sunday. And each day, you basically at the end of the day, and I used to write these out and print them. And each day I would do it. You would just check off, did you do that habit or not? And so that evolved then into like a Word document, which then evolved into a Microsoft spreadsheet, which is what I use currently, which is now going to be the app. And it's just gotten to the point where it's a little bit lengthy and it takes too much time to review these things, but it's so important. So one of my biggest habits I do is every single morning when I sit down, I review myself for the previous day. I score myself and I say, how did I do? And I look at how I did in each core and each of the habits that I'm working on, and I give myself a score. And then that, you track that over time and you see how you're doing. And so with the app, it's going to make it a lot more fun to want to do that, because then when you are you put a couple days together and you get these streaks, and you get a streak, and then you get momentum, and you're able to get to the next planet. You get to the next planet, you get to meet cool aliens, and you get to, see new things and explore different galaxies and these types of things. So it's very exciting. I'm super, super psyched to launch that.
Growing up, I really liked Benjamin Franklin. At the time, we didn't have access like we do now on the internet to have access to all of his materials, but I really liked how he operated and how he looked at things, and he was just really one of my favorites from anything I could get as a kid. And also that book that we just talked about, you just talked about earlier, the How to Influence Your Friends. I forget how the title exactly goes, but I read that as a teenager and it really changed my life. It really put things in a unique perspective. Not that it's everything you need, but it just really helped codify things for me and put a focus there. And hey, being Italian, it kind of comes easy as well. But it was very good. What's the full title? How to Influence Your Friends. There was more to it. What was that
How to
title?
Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. He wrote it back in like the 30s or 40s. So it's, I mean, the book's like 80, 90 years. I mean, it's like almost a century old. It's crazy. but you read it, and this is where I knew, I was like, okay, there's something here. There's universal principles that have been around since the beginning of man, and they're going to be around until we destroy ourselves. And if I can live my life by these, then I will be a happier, more productive, successful, whatever you want to call it, person. And that's what, so I made it my mission to kind of learn these things. And so Dale Carnegie's book, I mean, to sum up his universal principle in a nutshell, is essentially just take the attention off of yourself and make it about the other person. Just make the other person feel important. That's it. And if I could say it in one sentence, and he does a whole book, and there's all these examples, and it just starts to click, and you go, wow, it's not about me. If I want to be loved, if I want to have all the riches in the world, if I want to have all the friends and all this, just make the other person feel special. Be genuinely interested in them. And again, that's not something that's just comes naturally, because most of us are selfish human beings and it's all about us, right? And so you got to practice these things. And but by forcing yourself to ask questions and these little habit tricks and hacks that you can use to sort of get your mind off of yourself and on the other person, then you really do become interested in these people. And then that comes across more genuine. And then you start remembering names and you start asking questions about their family and whatnot. And then that is reciprocated tenfold. When you show somebody that you respect them and think they're important, then it comes back to you and then some, which is a really neat process.
Those are some great resources for our entrepreneurial audience. Are there any other resources that you can think of that have really stimulated you to success and have really helped you on? I mean, Benjamin Franklin is good. Andrew Carnegie is good. Just if there was anything else that you think is pivotal to our success as an entrepreneur, I think I know you've got something else there.
I mean, yeah, I mean, my library is there. I've read so many books. There's so many. I mean, I'd say the top three books. One would be that How to Win Friends and Influence People. Second would be, maybe it's a tie between Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, another old one, but really, really good. And that's not just for finances, which it sounds like it is, but it is that, but it's also your mindset. It's a mindset book. And then also Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is, I'd say those two are tied for career and finances, just in terms of how to exponentially grow your wealth and how to look at money like the rich people, like wealthy people do, and just get into that mindset. And then, I mean, the third book, which is a more recent one, is Atomic Habits by James Clear, and he does a really great job of describing these habits that I'm talking about and how integral they are in our lives and how much they dictate our happiness, the actions we take, all these things, and we don't really realize it. And he kind of breaks it down. And so that was kind of a really cool book for me to read as I started to really get into this stuff, because then I said, well, what he's missing though, like I said earlier in this broadcast, the elephant in the room, what he's missing is like a way to connect the dots. Like, he's telling you all this great stuff that you're like, yes, habits, I need to improve. And he has some suggestions, but there wasn't a way it wasn't gamified. There wasn't a way to like a system to make sure that people actually started doing these things. And I said, I want to marry the two. I want to take all that awesome information and make sure that it's put into a system that's fun and interesting for people to want to take the actions, so that it actually makes a difference in their life.
When I look at some of this and I look at your site, the one thing that attracted me right away, and I go, I want to do this interview. I want to meet Will, is gamify your life. Because I think of life is really, if you look at it as a fun event, as an actual game, it changes the point of view and it changes how you actually operate in that life. And while a game you consider is something, well, you're searching for something, I consider it something you're having a lot of fun at while you're on that journey. And I just love that concept to gamify our life. And I can't wait to have your app and see what you have on that. But to me, that takes the drudgery out of it. It helps you when you run into a barrier. It's just as if you're playing some, computer game, or, you're looking at it as a fun event. And I think that point of view just changes everything in accomplishing and getting one's success.
Yeah, I totally agree. Right. Again, that goes back to your mindset, how you're perceiving things, how you're looking at the world. And that's going to make all the difference. And if you're looking at it like, all right, let's go. This is a game and I want to win it. And how do I do that? We got to do these certain things versus, oh God, another day I got to get up and go to work or do this stuff that I hate doing and poor me, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
And I think the purpose really helps into that. I didn't really focus too much on your purpose at the beginning, and because I just got caught up. But I think having that purpose that we'll get up and do and work on whatever it is just because we love it so much is so important, whether we get paid or not. Of course, eventually we'll get paid so that we can eat and all that. But I think it's that purpose, that reason that really just sets the stage in the whole thing.
Absolutely. Right. You got to be, you got to have your why. You got to know what you're doing and why you're doing it. And versus, again, that ties to being a growth owner of saying, okay, I got what I got all these great things and I'm going to figure out how to put them together and I'm going to have a goal and I'm going to move towards it. And that's okay if that goal changes and if it pivots, that's as you become more aware and you learn more about yourself, it may very well, but you got to at least have a starting point. Otherwise you're a fixed victim being just pulled this way and that by every, shiny object that comes across your screen, which these days it's a lot.
Yeah, well, having that vision and knowing and having that objective in place of where you're going really helps so that no matter what storm or barriers come in, you're still on focus, you're still on that path because
Yes.
that's your reason, that's your why, that's your purpose. Great points here. Great points here. I think we've covered just about everything. And I'm just kind of how's that Oh, yes, your podcast. We didn't really talk too much about your podcast, Gamify Your Life. I presume we can find that on the usual Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and so forth. And do you on your podcast, it's all about gamifying your life and it covers these five cores. If we listen to it, we'll get more information on the five cores and success habits.
Yeah. I interview people like you, I interview thought leaders and people that have excelled in their fields. And then I get into asking them, well, what are the habits you've developed? How, are you gamifying? How are you gamifying? Because everybody does things differently. And, as people listen to my podcast, they may go, oh, wow, I never thought about it that way. I could use that. I could trick my brain into taking that action and doing that and developing that habit the way that this person's doing it. And so it's just kind of ways to help you sort of see how other successful people are doing it and try to start mirroring that in your life.
I'm going to go check that out. Sounds great. Well, once again, we talked about getting more momentum with Will Moore, and you can find him at moremomentum.com. Will, very interesting and intriguing. I can't wait for your app and your book to come out. I want to thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you so much. This has been awesome, Tony. I appreciate you letting me babble and talk about all this stuff. As you can see, I'm super passionate. I'm walking my walk and talking my talk. I'm using my strengths and this is what I'm super passionate about. And I'm turning this into something where, I'm helping the world hopefully and leaving that legacy like we talked about earlier. So I'm grateful to be on a platform where I can spread that message. So thank you.
Hey, thanks for hanging out with me while I featured an elite entrepreneur who took his vision to reality multiple times over. I'm inspired. We talked about some very good points, the success habits and the five cores. That was mindset, career and finance, relationships, physical health, emotional health. He's got an app coming out, a book, and all sorts of stuff. If you go to his website, you can actually get and zone into these five cores. These are what made huge success. Don't let them go over your head. Take your time, zone in, study each one. This is the good stuff. I want to thank you so much. And please remember supporting the show with a nice review on Apple Podcasts, as well as some comments on the video platforms. I know I ask you about that now and then. And also share this with a few friends to help them too. All right. Please use this and let's help you move on your journey to success. Thanks. And remember, just take action. Success awaits those who persevere and remain steadfast despite the odds. Sow good seeds, do good deeds, and join me on the next episode of The Tony DUrso Show.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's edition of the Tony DUrso Show with his key influencers. Be sure to tune in again next Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 p.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Influencers channel.